The courtroom doors were already closed when I got there. I remember standing in that hallway, still in my scrubs under my coat, my hair half fallen out of its bun, and thinking, this is fine. I'm early. I'm actually 3 minutes early, but the doors were closed, and when I pushed through them, the ceremony was already over. I'm a paramedic. I've been one for 6 years, working out of a station in Mississauga, and the first thing they teach you, the first thing that gets drilled into you so hard it becomes instinct, is that when someone needs help, you don't look at the clock. You don't think about what you had planned. You move. That instinct is what cost me my wedding. Or at least, that's what I told myself for a long time. I'd been with Derek for 4 years. We met at a barbecue in the annex. His cousin and my coworker had been trying to set us up for months, and the second we actually met in person, I understood why everyone had been so insistent. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, the kind of person who remembered small details about everyone he talked to. He asked me what the hardest part of my job was. Not what was exciting, not what was scary, the hardest part. I told him it was the calls you never stopped thinking about, and he nodded like he already knew. We moved in together after 18 months into a condo in Port Credit, with a view of the lake that we both agreed we didn't deserve and couldn't afford, and absolutely could not pass up. Derek worked in commercial real estate. He was good at it, pulled decent commissions, and he had a kind of confidence about money that I found reassuring at the time. I was the stable income, the steady paycheck, the one with benefits and a pension. He was the upside. My best friend, Petra, we'd been close since nursing school, before I switched paths and went into paramedicine, loved Derek. Or said she did. She came to our housewarming, helped me pick out curtains, asked him questions about his work with what I read as genuine interest. Looking back, I can identify the moments I missed. Derek would text while Petra was over, and she'd glance at his phone before I could. The two of them would sometimes finish each other's sentences about things they'd supposedly only heard about secondhand. Once, when I came home early from a shift, they were both in the kitchen, and the conversation stopped a beat too late when I walked in. I noticed all of it. I explained all of it away. We got engaged in March, on a Wednesday night, sitting on our balcony with grocery store wine and a ring he said he'd been keeping in his work bag for 2 months, because the moment was never quite right. I cried. He cried a little too, or his eyes got wet in a way that looked like crying, and I decided that was the same thing. We kept the wedding small. Courthouse in downtown Toronto, immediate family only, lunch after at a restaurant on King Street that had a private room we could book for reasonable. I didn't want the big event. I wanted the marriage. I wanted it to be ours. The date was a Saturday in October. We set the time for 11 in the morning. 2 days before, Derek called me on my break to say he thought we should move it up to 10:30. His aunt was flying in from Calgary, and her flight was landing at noon, which meant she'd miss it either way, so what was the point? But his mother wanted to get ahead of the afternoon traffic, and 10:30 made more sense for parking downtown. I said fine. I made a mental note. I did not, and I genuinely cannot explain why. Write it down anywhere or send myself a reminder. The morning of our wedding, I was called in at 6 a.m. There had been a fire in an apartment complex in Etobicoke. Old building, slow evacuation, 2 kids still unaccounted for when the first units arrived. I was already awake when the call came in. My partner Gus picked me up at 6:15, and by 6:45 we were on scene. One of the children had made it out on her own. The other, a boy, 7 years old, his name was Owen, was found unconscious on the 3rd floor by firefighters and handed to us with smoke inhalation bad enough that his oxygen saturation was dropping by the second. We worked on him in the back of the rig for 11 minutes before his numbers stabilized. 11 minutes that felt like they were happening inside a different dimension, where time moved strangely, and the only thing that existed was this small person and the equipment in my hands, and Gus calling out vitals in a voice, deliberately slower and steadier than either of us felt. Owen made it. He was admitted to sick kids, and he made it. I called Derek at 8:47. He didn't pick up. I texted him, "Still on scene, should be done by 10. I'll get there. Don't worry." He didn't reply. I called again at 9:15. Voicemail. Gus drove me to the courthouse. I was in my uniform. I hadn't eaten anything since the night before. I remember looking out the passenger window at the city going by and thinking about Owen's face, about the specific color his lips had been when we found him, and then thinking, I'm getting married today. Today is my wedding day. The two things felt like they were happening in separate rooms of my brain that weren't connected to each other. We pulled up at 10:27. I was 3 minutes early for the original time. 33 minutes late for the time Derek had moved it to, the time he had called to change, the time I had agreed to and not written down and had not been reminded of once in the 48 hours since. The hallway outside the courtroom was empty. I pushed through the doors. Derek was standing at the front of the room, signing something. Petra was beside him in a white dress. The officiant was still holding the ceremony book. My mother was sitting in the second row with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Something past shock, something that had already moved through shock and come out the other side into a kind of terrible stillness. The whole room turned when I came in. Derek looked at me for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked away. Petra did not look away. She held my gaze, and her expression was not guilty. That's the thing I've thought about most in the time since. It was not guilty. It was something that looked almost like relief. Derek's mother, Francine. She was standing against the wall to my right, and she was the one who spoke first. "You're too late," she said. Flat. Factual. "You were a no-show. This is done." I don't know what I said. I don't think I said anything. I remember looking at my mother, and she stood up, and she walked to me, and she put her hand on my arm and walked me out the door. In the hallway, she said, "I didn't know how to stop it." I said, "How long did you wait?" She said, "Until 10:35. Then the officiant said he had another appointment. 5 minutes. They had waited 5 minutes past the moved-up time before proceeding, and I had been 3 minutes early for the time I had agreed to. I went to my mother's house in Oakville that night. I brought nothing. I had nothing with me except my uniform and my phone. My mother fed me soup and didn't ask me questions, which was exactly right. The next morning, I called in to my union rep, filed for a personal leave, and then I sat at my mother's kitchen table and I started making calls. The first call I made was to a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer. I mean, we weren't married, but a family law lawyer, because Derek and I had a joint account we'd opened 18 months ago for shared household expenses, and I needed to understand where I stood. Where I stood, as it turned out, was not great. The lawyer's name was Ingrid Halverson. She was efficient and unsentimental, and she asked me the questions in a quick, clean sequence that made me feel like I was being processed through something important. Did I know how much was in the joint account? Roughly. Had I signed anything giving Derek access to my personal accounts? No. Had I co-signed any loans or lines of credit with Derek in the last 2 years? I had. In the spring, Derek had come to me with an investment opportunity. A pre-construction condo project in Hamilton. One of his colleagues was involved. The numbers looked good and the entry point was low enough that we could manage the financing together. I had co-signed a line of credit for $68,000. The project had started, or so I'd been told. Derek handled the details because it was his field and I trusted him. Ingrid put her pen down very carefully. Miss Macaulay," she said. How much do you know about the status of that project? I told her what Derek had told me. She wrote something down. I'd like you to pull your credit report before our next meeting, she said. And I'd like you to check whether any draws have been made on that line of credit in the last 6 months. I pulled my credit report that afternoon from my mother's laptop. There had been 4 draws on the line of credit. The balance was at $61,000. The last draw had been made 11 days ago. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I called Ingrid back. She filed an emergency injunction the following morning, freezing the account and the line of credit pending investigation. She also told me, very calmly, that Derek had a judgment against him from a failed real estate partnership in Ontario. Something from 2022, $60,000, a former business partner in Brampton, who had taken him to court and won. She had found it in 45 minutes of searching public court records. Did you know about this? I did not know about this, she asked. Did you know, she continued, that there is also a complaint filed with Rico regarding his conduct as a real estate agent? It was filed 8 months ago. It's still open. I did not know about that either. I thought about the confidence. The easy way he talked about money. The deals that were always about to come through. I thought about Petra in that white dress and the look on her face that wasn't guilty. The look that was something else. Relief. I asked Ingrid, what would have happened if I'd married him this morning? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, depending on how the co-signing documents were structured, you could have been significantly more liable for the line of credit. And as a spouse, you would have had different obligations in any creditor action. It's complicated, but being unmarried is better for you in this situation. I sat with that too. Derek moved out of the Port Credit condo 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't. He did not move out willingly. He moved out because the lease was in my name, because I had been the primary income, because my name was the one on the building's rental agreement. And when I told building management I needed to add someone to the no-access list, they were remarkably straightforward about it. He called me twice. I didn't answer. He texted once, a long message I read once and deleted. The gist of it was that he had always loved me, that things with Petra had happened, and he couldn't explain it, that he hoped someday I'd understand. There was nothing in it about the $61,000. Petra did not contact me at all. The investigation that Ingrid's office triggered eventually got folded into a broader RICO review of Derek's real estate activities. I'm not going to pretend I tracked it closely. I had a lawyer handling my portion, and honestly, I had other things to do. I had a job to go back to, and a life to recalibrate, and a version of myself to figure out now that I wasn't going to become the person I'd planned to be. What I know is this: I got back $61,000 through the recovery process, less legal fees. The judgment against Derek from 2022 complicated his ability to defend himself, and the Hamilton project was found to have significant irregularities. I don't know the full outcome because it stopped being my story. My mother, when I told her about the money, did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not unkindly. She shook her head and said, "Leanne, you saved a little boy's life that morning." My name is Leanne Macaulay. That's the first time I've said it in this whole thing, I realize, because I've been so focused on what happened to me that I almost forgot to say who I am. I am a paramedic. I've been one for 6 years. I work out of Mississauga, and I am good at what I do. And the morning of my almost wedding, I was late because I was working, and the man I was supposed to marry didn't pick up his phone. Because he had already decided he wasn't going to marry me. He moved the time up. He didn't tell me. He didn't pick up when I called. And then he stood in front of an officiant with my best friend in a white dress at 10:30 in the morning, and he let it happen. She had worn white, to be the backup, Or maybe not the backup. Maybe there was no backup plan. Maybe this was always the plan, and I was the one who had never been in on it. I think about Owen sometimes. I looked him up once, the way you do. Searched the news coverage from the fire, found a follow-up piece in a local outlet from a few weeks later. He was back at school. His family had been rehoused through the city. There was a photo of him holding a certificate of something, or other from the fire department, grinning with all his teeth. He doesn't know my name. He doesn't know there was a woman in the back of an ambulance who spent 11 minutes keeping him in this world instead of getting dressed for her wedding. That's fine. That's how it's supposed to work. But I know. And on the days when the other thing, the Derek thing, the Petra thing, the $61,000 and the white dress thing, tries to take up too much space in my head, I go back to that morning. Not to the courtroom, to the rig. To Gus calling out the numbers in his careful voice. To the moment Owen's oxygen saturation finally moved in the right direction. I used to think that being good at my job meant I had to sacrifice everything else. That caring too much about the call meant I wasn't capable of caring enough about the person waiting for me. Derek certainly implied as much. In those conversations couples have in the dark when someone's trying to explain why they feel lonely. He'd say that I was always somewhere else in my head, that he never felt like the priority. Now I think that was strategy. I think he was building the case, slowly, over months, for why what he did was understandable. Justified, even. She was never really present. She cared more about work than about us. What was I supposed to do? I suppose what he was supposed to do was have a direct conversation, or end the relationship, or not secretly open a line of credit in my name and drain it before the wedding. But that's the thing about people who are very charming and very careful. They are also very good at making you the unreliable narrator of your own life. I was not the unreliable narrator. I was a paramedic who took an emergency call on the morning of her wedding because a 7-year-old boy needed her, and I would do it again every single time. It's been 14 months. I have a new apartment in Lakeshore. Smaller, cheaper, entirely mine. My mother calls every Sunday. Gus and I got coffees last week and talked for 3 hours about nothing and everything the way you can with someone who has seen you at your worst and didn't think any less of you for it. I went on a date last month. It was fine. The person was nice, a teacher named. It doesn't matter. It was fine. I came home and sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and watched the planes going over the lake and thought, I am doing all right. Not great. Not fixed. Not the person I was before, because that person doesn't exist anymore and wouldn't fit back into this life even if she did. But all right. The line of credit is paid off. The joint account has been closed. The RICO complaint. The last I heard from Ingrid. I have stopped checking. Petra posted engagement photos on Instagram 4 months ago. The comments were full of heart emojis. I don't follow her anymore, but someone I know sent me a screenshot, the way people do, with the kind of energy that wants you to be devastated. I wasn't devastated. I was tired, mostly, and then I was fine. The morning of my almost wedding, I pushed through the courtroom doors and saw something I will never forget, and I walked back out the same doors with my mother's hand on my arm. And the city was still outside, and the day was still going, and somewhere across town a small boy was breathing on his own for the first time in an hour. I didn't know that yet. I found out later. But I've thought about it a lot since then. The strange, specific grace of doing the right thing without knowing what it costs you, and finding out afterward that the cost was actually a gift. That the thing you lost was only ever a risk you'd been carrying without knowing it. That the morning everything fell apart was also the morning you got out. I don't need Derek to understand that. I don't need Petra to feel bad about it. I don't even need Owen to know my name. I just need to know that when it mattered, When the doors were closed and the call came in and there was a choice to make, even if I didn't know I was making it, I made the right one. That's enough. Most days, that's more than enough.